Welcome to the She Will Shine podcast, where we bring you the real stories of female business owners. My name is Danielle Price and I'm the founder of She Will Shine, a supportive business network for women. It's time to give a voice to women in business and discover their journey. Hi and welcome to the She Will Shine podcast. Today I am very excited to introduce you to the lovely Leonie Lockwood. Hi Leonie.
Hi Danielle.
Leonie is a yoga instructor and teacher at Leonie Lockwood Yoga, and today is going to share a little bit about her journey and what sort of led her to where she is now. So Leonie, we were talking earlier and I discovered that you, which I didn't know this, I've known Leonie for a little bit of time, you left school at 16.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I was, I kind of liked school, but I couldn't get the subjects that I wanted to do when I was moving into HSC, and I was probably a little slightly rebellious at that point, so I left with the promise to my mother that if I didn't find work, then I would go to secretarial school. So I went on unemployment benefits for a year and hung out with my boyfriend. Got really bored, and my boyfriend and I had a bet, because it was back in the 80s when jobs were really easy to come by, as to who would get a job first, and I got a job.
You won the bet.
I won the bet, and I really liked working. Yeah.
So since then though, so even though you've left school at quite a young age, you've done a lot of study.
Yes, that's right. Yeah, so I've always liked learning, and I was also one of those people that always did my own projects at school, but things that I was interested in. So I had to wait until I was 21 before I could go to university, and I really wanted to do theatre. So I had to audition, and I ended up at what was called the Riverina Institute in Wagga Wagga back in 1988, and then the following year it became Charles Sturt University. So I did an Associate Diploma of Theatre Performance and got the lead role in the graduation play, and I still really love acting, but it was the theatre, being away from home, being in your early 20s, it was just lots of partying. Yeah,
lots of social life behind the scenes.
Lots of social life behind the scenes. Did well at uni, but and then I came back to Melbourne, and I went from being sort of a big fish in a little pond to being a very small fish in a big
huge ocean.
In a huge ocean, and so just finding acting work was really difficult.
Yeah. And so that was the reason you came to Melbourne, to find acting work?
Yeah. Well, I was from Melbourne, went to Wagga Wagga. Yeah. Came back to Melbourne.
Wagga Wagga?
That's where I got into uni.
Okay. Yeah. Seems like a strange place to just pick off the map.
Yeah. I mean, it was really where there was drama schools. So there was the VCA, and I knew that I wasn't good enough for the VCA, and there was a school over in Perth, and there was this school in Wagga, and I wanted to go to Wagga with the intent of maybe getting into the VCA or NIDA later on down the track.
So what happened? You came to Melbourne?
Came to Melbourne. Yep. Found an agent. Didn't get any work, or what work was offered was like, well, you've got to show up tomorrow. And I was like, well, I'm waitressing, because that's what you do when you're an actor. You waitress. And I was kind of like, well, I need to pay the rent. Yeah. So I just stuck with the waitressing, and then decided that I wanted to travel overseas. So went travelling overseas to Europe and Scandinavia for a year.
Solo?
I set off with a couple of girlfriends, and we spent a couple of months in Spain, then they went home, and then they had the rest of the time by myself. Yeah.
Was it an amazing experience?
Yeah, it was really amazing, because when I left to go overseas, I was going to spend 2 months in Spain and 1 month in Stockholm with a friend of mine, and then I was coming home. But while I was over there, I was like, wow, what's the point in coming home? It's a long way, I'll just stay. So I didn't have much money, so had to find work whilst I was away. So I went to London and found some work waitressing and doing care work in a disability home. Yeah.
So how long were you away all up?
A year.
And then on your return?
Then on my return, I came back. I started like a sort of a introductory massage course, which I really liked. But I also, and then I was looking around for university as well. And I was a bit like, do I go to university or do I do social work? Which is because I'd worked in this disability home in London. I was kind of interested in that work. And I was also interested in the passageway of young people. And I guess given because I'd left home and left school at a fairly young age, I was kind of interested in other young people having their needs met.
Yeah.
So I ended up getting in to do a Bachelor of Arts of Youth Affairs at RMIT, and so I ditched my massage course and I completed my 3-year degree. I was, you had to do field placements and I worked in some pretty hairy places. I was really interested in homelessness and really kind of hardcore, in your face type work.
That would have been quite hard emotionally.
Yeah, and when I look back now, like I was incredibly emotionally immature myself to be dealing with some of the things that I was dealing with, and young people with drug and alcohol problems coming from lots of sexual assaults and violence in their own homes, and they're acting out behaviour and trying to support them to stay in school.
Yeah.
And live independently as well. So it was difficult work.
Was it an eye-opener?
Oh yeah, absolute eye-opener. I come from a fairly middle-class family, so it was a real eye-opener. But, also not that it's people from lower socioeconomic backgrounds, it's people from all sorts of backgrounds. And as I went on, I did a graduate diploma in adolescent health with Melbourne Uni and the Royal Children's Hospital. But as I continued to work with young people, I just found it, like, personally just completely grueling.
Yeah.
And so I started working with families and adults, providing crisis response to homelessness.
Did you enjoy it?
I liked the crisis response. I found out, like, I wasn't very good at long-term support, that I'm much better at having a problem presented to me, solving it, sending the person out the door.
Yeah. Having a particular task, we were talking about this earlier, having a particular task or project and then moving on to the next thing.
Yeah. So I found that I was much better at that than giving long-term support to somebody. And I suppose a bit like having a child, having that kind of behaviour. And it's like, wow, I don't know how to deal with that. Yeah.
I know, you just wing it.
Yeah. And of course you've got your own stuff going on.
Yeah.
Yeah. So... so I stayed in that sector and sort of moved around. I had a number of different roles. I was a tenant advocate for people who are living in public housing, assisting them not to be thrown out of their properties, linking them up with support services, drug and alcohol services, mental health services, where we could, to, sort of put the infrastructure in behind so that they could continue to pay their rent and maintain their housing, because it costs a lot of money when people lose their housing. It's almost like, back then I think the figures were around about $100,000 by the time a person sort of cycled through the crisis system into transitional housing and then back into more stable accommodation. So it's better if you can sort of prevent people from losing their housing in the first place.
So did you find that frustrating, like working within government structures and systems and all that chaos?
It was really... it's difficult working, like I was working for not-for-profit organisations for probably about 10 years, and our funding was from the government and it was rolled over every 3 years. Certain criteria had to be met to roll over the funding, so you never knew whether you were going to have a job or the particular program was going to be changed, the criteria changed. So there was always a lot of, I guess, uncertainty around that, though I guess then I always knew that I would find work because I felt like there was work around to find. Unemployment levels weren't what they are now.
So what did you do from there?
Look, the way we coped really was to drink a lot of alcohol. And I used to really sort of think about it. We'd be just getting so smashed on a Friday night that it was like, we're not all that far away from the people that we were dealing with. because many of the people, you know, it just takes one little crisis to just break, you know, be the straw that breaks the camel back.
And it can happen to anyone.
And can happen to anyone. And I worked in homelessness sector, in crisis housing, in the eastern suburbs, you know, in Hawthorne, which you think of as a very leafy, wealthy area. We covered all the way up to, I think, Box Hill. And I was struck by the amount of hidden homelessness in those areas. So yeah, it's very different from the sort of in the face that you would have in St Kilda. What you didn't see, I think, in the east, were, you know, like families just sleeping in their cars or moving around from house to house, or, you know, like the husband who'd gambled away everything and without the wife and children knowing, and, you know, and then all of a sudden, you know, this fairly wealthy middle class woman finds herself at the mercy of, you know, not-for-profit sector and government looking for handouts, and it's like, well, there's actually not a lot to give. And I found that you know, just working in different areas, I was in, you know, Richmond, Fitzroy, Collingwood on the public housing estates as a tenant advocate. So I was always around fairly inner city areas where a lot of people are drawn to, because that's where the services are to give them support. But you know, the compassion, I guess, that I had started with was starting to wane. And for me, it was like, well, if I can't be compassionate with this, then how do you continue? Because people then just start to become a number. And I found that I was changing in ways that was really confronting to my values. And I was, the more, you know, I had to say no to people. I can't help you today, or, you know, come back in 2 months' time when you're eligible for a little bit more money. Like, it just became harder and harder.
So how did you deal with it?
We drank. Yeah, we drank. Yeah. And we partied. Yeah. And, you know,
like two extremes, isn't it?
Yeah. So it was no good for either of us. And so, but my mum had always done yoga. And so I was, you know, quite familiar with yoga. As a kid, we used to watch telly and do Swami Saravasti on telly, and
some people didn't even know what yoga was.
Like, you know, back in the 70s, it was really freaky. There weren't many people teaching yoga. It was all black leotards and black tights, and, you know, so Mum did that, and, you know, the exercises that she would do, you know, like probably what, you know, don't happen in yoga studios now, like you know, practices of cleansing your nasal passages and, you know, stomach churning and things like that to cleanse and detoxify the organs. So all really kind of weird stuff.
Yeah.
So, and she went to class once a week for probably about 40 years, you know, and so I'd done a bit of yoga, and I'd always liked exercise. So I dipped in and out of yoga in my 20s, and really in my mid-30s, I was so stressed. I was really unhealthy, very burnt out, pretty depressed. And so I started practicing a bit more yoga. And I was like, I'd bought a property, and I was like, I don't know how to get out of this. Like, how do I pay for this property, and how do I get out of this field of work? And I couldn't see a way out. And I went on holidays to Nepal and spent a month trekking to Everest Base Camp just to kind of think.
Yeah.
And probably about day 21 of the trek, I went, I could work part-time and study part-time.
So it just kind of hit you when you had that sort of silence around you, not the noise of everyday life. Yeah,
exactly. It took a while.
Yeah,
you know, 7 hours walking a day.
Could you have done that on day one, Leonie?
Yeah, I know, right? So I came back and actually worked full time and found a remedial massage course that was a full-time course, but it was it was like a full weekend. I think it was once a month or every fortnight.
Okay, so you could do that while you're working?
Yeah, so I could do that, and that went for a year. And it wasn't like the massage college of my choice, but it was just a way of getting into the industry and going back to something that I'd enjoyed. You know, 10 years previously before I started down the road of the homelessness sector. So I started doing massage. I then was seconded into state government for 3 months to write some quality practice guidelines. And while I was in there, they said, would you like to stay? And I was like, I'd love to stay. So, you know, the adrenaline levels had just dropped. There was no one threatening me on a daily basis, or
it's kind of smooth sailing,
sitting in a lovely office, head office. So it was great, and I got to work on some really interesting projects in state government. I was the first person from the not-for-profit sector to move into state government, so I was kind of a bit of a curiosity in a way.
Did that help you?
In some ways, yes. In some ways, I had absolutely no idea of the process. And because I'd been at coordinator level, I'd had a certain level of autonomy. So, but, you know, in government, there's all these processes and sign-offs, and it, you know, and you can't always have your way and your ideas. And I'm a bit outspoken at times. So, yeah, that wasn't, sometimes didn't go down so well. Yeah, but so I worked on some interesting stuff, and one of the interesting things I worked on was like putting together training for the not-for-profit sector, because we funded the homelessness sector through Bendigo TAFE to undertake certain training programs. So I was like, well, okay, I've been in the sector, these are the things that we need training in. So it was really good to have input in that. And then I was moved to a beautiful project of managing the community garden program on public housing estates. And so there's a number of gardens where the public housing tenants have plots, grow veggies, and some of them are beautifully successful. So it was really nice to work on that type of project and be in a position where you're bringing happiness to people instead of saying no.
Yeah, it was looking at it from a different perspective, wasn't it?
Yeah. So, and there's some great people in state government who really want to make a difference, but are often just stymied by the politics of the day of whoever's in government, and of course by funding all the time.
Was that frustrating?
Yeah, it could be at times, But I was doing lots of yoga by then. I was, you know, going to classes 3 or 4 times a week. I was teaching. I started teaching at state government as well. I had a really great boss. I was able to take a year off without pay, and I went to India and just studied yoga and travelled around India and Nepal.
Did it feel like after what you experienced previously, did it kind of feel like everything was kind of in balance again?
Slowly. I was pretty sick in India for a while. So slowly things got into a bit of balance. And, you know, coming back to state government was just, it's like, why are you asking me to do this? Like, it just seems so ridiculous what you're asking me. It just seems so petty. And
when you're looking at the bigger picture.
When you look at the bigger picture, when you see poverty in other countries and you see how people deal with that and the different systems in place. And for all its poverty in many ways, there's such a sense of community in India and Nepal that I think has really been lost in the West. So, so I just sort of amped up the teaching. There was a change of government. We moved to a Liberal government. They said, we're getting rid of 500 people, voluntary redundancies. All the people that have been here the longest time are going to be the ones to go. And I was like, oh, I've only been here for 6 years, you know. I was away for a year of it. And I thought,
6 years is a long time, though.
Oh, people have been there like 25 years plus, right?
Government job.
So it was, I thought, well, just, you know, put your hat in the ring and see what happens. And the team I was working in, I think there was 8 of us. We were down to 3. Everybody else had left. The workload was still the same. And this new manager came in and he's like, what do you want to do? There was a restructure going on. I said, I really want a redundancy. like, can you make it happen? I don't know. And then the next thing, like about a week later, I was offered, I think, one of the last redundancies. And I was like, in my head, I was like, well, if they offer me this, I'll go.
Yeah.
And it was double the amount. And I was like, okay, you got no choice now.
Yeah,
like,
you have to. You said it in your head.
You said it in your head. You've got to go.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, I've got massage, I've got yoga.
So you kind of had a vague plan of what you would do.
Very
when you
vague
left.
plan. Yeah. I mean, I was teaching, I think, 2 yoga classes a week and massaging 1 day a week. So it wasn't much of a plan. And, you know, in the exit interview, they give you an exit interview with a psychologist, you know, and help you with your resume.
Yeah.
And he was like, well, you know, you've got to be really good at decision making. You've got to think quickly on your feet. And I'm thinking, oh, that's not me. yeah. And I was like, I'll be right. She'll be right, mate. Kind of thing.
I'll work it out as I get along.
Yeah. And so, you know, it was a really big 6 months. My mother passed away. The family home was sold.
This was the 6 months following the redundancy?
This was before.
Oh, before, okay.
Before. So, like, my mother passed away in July. The family house was sold about 2 weeks later.
Oh, far out. That's quick.
Yeah. Well, no, it was already on the market.
Okay.
But, yeah. And then, so we had to move by the November. I'd been living with my dad to help care for my mum. And so I moved back into my apartment, which I'd rented out. And so, yeah, and then I left work in the December. So it was like a really big 6 months. And
life-changing.
Huge. Yeah. And I was like, I don't know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
But, and then a guy that I was massaging with was teaching massage at a private college. And he said to me, you know, I'm going to leave, but I haven't told him yet, but I kind of want to find a replacement. And I said, well, what about me? And I'd done my Certificate 4 in workplace training and assessment while I was in the not-for-profit sector, but hadn't really used it. So I did like a 1-day refresher.
Yeah, so it finally came in handy.
It finally came in handy. There was a couple of units I had to get up onto speed because the qual had changed somewhat. And I went and did a little audition for them, brought in my acting skills, and so
I guess that came in handy too. Yeah,
that came in handy. It all sort of melds together.
Yeah.
So then I taught massage for a year and just built up the yoga classes, and then decided that, you know, teaching massage really wasn't my thing. So I left that. And
so how long had you done that for?
I taught massage for a year.
Yep.
And I was doing a bit of massage on the side, but much more yoga. And I was much more interested in yoga because I'd been massaging part-time for probably about 6 years by then, and my body was not coping with it. Yeah. So I was having a lot of shoulder pain, and, you know, coupled with sitting at a desk and being at a mouse. So the right arm wasn't feeling particularly happy. So I was sort of like, well, when I'm teaching yoga, I don't have to, you know, it's a different way of presenting. So what keeps drawing you back? What kept drawing you back to yoga? Just that thing when I walked out of a yoga class, just that whole sense of inner clarity of mind, body, and spirit. And yoga means to yoke, and it's about yoking that mind, body, and spirit. And it's what you don't get from Pilates or, you know, a game of tennis. Like, you get that physical fitness, but you don't get that sort of
kind of all-encompassing.
Yeah, it's that return to like that deep inner wisdom.
Yeah.
And some study I just finished over the weekend, they beautifully call it the source. And I think that's a really nice, it's sort of beyond the body-mind complex. And, you know, sometimes when we're really still and quiet, you know, it's sort of that inner intuition that arises, and that it's kind of like a knowing all the way through to the bones. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's I guess, in practicing it, it's bringing your attention to it.
Yeah.
And trusting in it.
Yeah. And the more you practice it, the more you become in tune with it, and the more you realize that there's a totally different way to live your life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So at what point did you think this could be a business?
I think at some point when I was I don't know. Look, when I was in the public service, I was like, God, work's getting in the way of yoga.
Yeah.
You know, but business-wise, I don't know. I think I just had to make it happen after I had that redundancy. I had that to fall back on. When my mum passed away, I had a little bit of money as well. So it was like there was money to fall back on, and I could just continue to just give it a go. And I think, you know, in the early years, I've been teaching 9 3/4 years now. So I think in the early years, I was a bit dog with a bone and not particularly yogic, quite competitive.
Well, there's quite an abundance these days of yoga.
Yeah, well, there is
and teachers
now.
and things.
Oh my God, it's a very competitive market, and I think also it's a market that's taken on aspects of yoga, but not what I would call like the deep heart of yoga.
Yeah, kind of bastardized to a degree.
It's pretty much all about the poses now, and sort of a bit of, it's almost like pop psychology with it, and then lots of fluff.
Yeah.
To some degree. And
do you find that frustrating?
Some, and I try to work in places where it's not about that, where they've got more heart, more soul. And I think one of the things that's really struck me over the last, probably about the last 4 years or so, is the importance of working in accordance with my values. And I know that when I don't, I realise I'm much more in tune with my body now, so I realise when I'm not, when I'm making decisions that aren't in tune. So
I think that's for any industry though.
Yeah.
When you start working for yourself, you start realising what your values are, and when you sort of, you know, stray off that path.
Yeah.
I don't know how like there might be a physical thing or it might be a mental thing, but you know that you've got to kind of get back to where you are and where you want to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then there's other part of the brain going, well, you know, you've got bills to pay and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, well, how much of that do you sacrifice?
Yeah.
And I think it's about finding that own level of compromise within yourself.
Yeah. And doing it the way you believe
it
should be done.
Yeah. And so when I came across one of my teachers back in 2014, and in yin yoga, and he just explained some stuff around anatomy, and I was just like, the penny dropped, and it's like, that's why those people can't do those poses in class. It's not because they're not trying hard enough, which, you know, I'd always thought in the back of my mind, it's like, they're really not trying. They could put in a bit more effort.
And I've been to a couple of your classes now, I'm worried.
No, I used to think that about myself as well. You know, and it was really more about myself, because I used to think I wasn't trying hard enough, and sometimes I'd be told by teachers that I wasn't trying hard enough. And it's like, anatomically, it's just not possible because of the shape of my bones. It's not going to happen no matter how hard I try. And if I push it too much, I'm going to end up with hip surgery. So it was so enlightening and freeing.
It's a deeper understanding, isn't it?
Yeah, and just a beautiful way of then looking at your own body and looking at your student's body, and instead of having this more sort of discipline approach of try harder, strive, it moved to an approach of compassion.
Yeah.
And a place of just offering then a practice for people to practice as much as comfortable in their own bodies, a little bit of encouragement and push, but recognizing that more and more we're always so hard on ourselves, and maybe I think women do it better than men in terms of being hard on ourselves. So I think, you know, discovering yin yoga really changed my personality, and I say that when I'm running teacher training programs now, I'm like, this really shifted the way I thought about myself and the way I treated myself.
I was going to say, so it now reflects on when you're teaching other yoga teachers.
Yeah. And, you know, just even in the beginning of running training programs, and then how I run them now has vastly changed as well. So it's just this shift, and the more I continue to study and sit in some silence with my teachers and fellow yoga teachers, and you just kind of have a greater sense of your body, greater sense of compassion and kindness for people.
It's an evolution, like life is an evolution. You learn different things along the way, which changes you, and which is how it changes the way you move forward as well.
And I think it's about wisdom of age as well. You know, I'm getting older. It's like, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you can look back and you go, okay, well, I've pushed and I've pushed and I've pushed, and that actually hasn't worked. It's just driven me to burnout.
Yeah.
It's driven me, and at one point in my yoga teaching, I got to burnout with that as well. And I was like, I kind of almost hate this now, but I can't stay away from it in some ways.
Addicted to it.
Yeah. But I guess in running your own business, it becomes very 24/7, as you know. And so I think, more and more, I think there's got to be balance and moderation in everything. And so I realize I'm probably a bit yoga centric at the moment. And so my challenge.
Isn't that a good thing though?
Because in a way,
you're living.
Yeah.
What's that doing?
You're living your practice.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, it is. But there's this thing when you turn your hobby, what was a hobby, becomes a passion, and then there's money behind it, and that changes your relationship with it as well. And so that's been really interesting to work through that as well, and have a sense of yourself value in terms of worth, not just as a teacher, but being able to say, okay, well, I have this many years of experience and this many years of study behind me. There is something that I have to offer people.
And it's all about self-worth, self-confidence, everything, which we all
self-love,
we all suffer through, and try to kind of get out the other end as best we can, and encourage each other as best we can as well.
And yoga is a beautiful way to heal, just slowly. And I look back and I just see changes that I've made, and I'm certainly not perfect by any means at all. And I still, I know, but more and more perhaps I'm able to stop some of those sort of habitual responsive reactions that might not be so helpful, and approach things from a more considered approach. And I think that's just something that we can all learn from as we progress in life.
So which you do your teacher training, and you also run your yoga classes for individuals. What do you enjoy the most, or do they have different elements?
Just different. Like teaching this.
And you do retreats as well, so is there anything that you love, or you just love that you've got these different types of ways of expressing yoga?
I love that. I love being able to connect with people. And sometimes I think, it's a bit of a grind, weekly classes, you kind of drive for a bit, you teach for an hour, you drive again, It's
not a regular 9 to 5.
It's not a regular 9 to 5. You don't see your friends because, they're all out at night and you're working. So, or you go out and you're like, got to be home in bed by 9 o'clock because I'm getting up at 5. So, there's finding that balance, I think, has been a challenge. But then, you just sit on the mat out the front, and then maybe you help somebody get into a pose or explain something, or you got 30 people in Shavasana at the end of the class in a deep state of rest, and you're just like, I did that. Like, I helped these people enter their bodies and find rest and calm, even if it's just for an hour or 40 minutes or whatever it is. And I just think that's so powerful.
You've made such a difference.
And if they go home and they have one good night's sleep, great, and then they can face the fray again the next day.
Refreshed. Ready to start over.
And hopefully with a few tools that, maybe when somebody's yelling at them at work, they can just sort of take a few breaths and go, I got you. It's
beautiful, Leonie.
It makes me cry sometimes. Makes me cry.
It's because you love it.
I love it. And I suppose it's probably what I went into that homelessness sector for, because I liked being with people and I wanted to be of some sort of value and assistance to people. And when I left the sector, it was like, I can help people, but in a nicer kind of a way.
In a way it's softer on you as well.
That works for me. It needed to work for me, because as much as I really wanted the other way to work, it wasn't. It was just really soul destroying.
Before your mother passed away, did she know that you were moving more into the yoga?
So she was, so I was teaching by then. but I was still working at state government. So when she was really ill, and because she had motor neurone disease, she couldn't move her limbs anymore. But I would practice breath exercises with her and gentle massage, and you know, and we'd play healing kind of mantras to help the passing be easier. Yeah.
It's beautiful. It's a beautiful thing that you shared with her.
Yeah, it was.
And continue to share every time you do it.
Absolutely. She definitely inspired me.
Yeah, made me cry.
Made me cry.
Thank you so much, Leonie, for sharing your story. I've known you for a few years now.
A few
years now, and I kind of knew a little bit.
Yeah.
But it's so important, I think, to delve deeper.
Yep.
So thank you for
delving
delving
very
deeper
much.
with me.
Thanks for having me on the couch in the she shed.
In the she shed, yay. So thank you. We're both a bit teary, but thank you so much for joining us for today's episode. We will be with you again soon. Thank you. See you later.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us. If you enjoyed this episode of the She Will Shine podcast, we invite you to check out shewillshine.com.au. She Will Shine is the essential support network you need to grow a thriving, meaningful business. We can help you grow your network, connect and develop genuine relationships, be supported and support others in building and growing a successful business on your terms. Say goodbye to working alone and become a member at shewillshine.com.au.